Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, on the surface, the US economy looks like it's in total chaos, right? We've got tariffs being declared illegal, a falling dollar, an administration that just doubles down. But what if this isn't chaos at all? What if it's all part of a calculated strategy? That's what we're going to unpack today. We're going to connect the dots.
Okay, so first up, the headline that really kicked off this whole firestorm. The U.S. Supreme Court comes out with the 6-3 decision and just says, nope, the administration's emergency tariffs, they're illegal. And that's a huge legal blow, right? It goes right to the heart of their entire trade policy.
But you think that slowed them down? Not a chance. The response was immediate, and I mean furious. Just a few hours later, boom, they announced brand new 15% global tariffs. And get this, they bypassed Congress completely by dusting off this obscure, never really used part of a trade act from all the way back in 1974.
All right, so while all that trade drama is playing out, something else is happening in the background. A really big pillar of the global economy is starting to look a little shaky. We're talking about the US dollar. Its share of foreign reserves has actually hit a century low. That's a huge signal of a slow but very steady shift away from the world's go-to currency. So, where is all that money going? Well, you can see it right here. Investors are just flocking to what they see as safe havens. Gold is on its longest positive streak in history. That's a classic textbook sign of major geopolitical uncertainty. The message from the market is crystal clear. Real assets are in. Which brings us to the big question, right? Are all these things, the court ruling, the new tariffs, the falling dollar, are they just disconnected, random bits of chaos? Or are we actually watching the deliberate moves in a much, much bigger game? All right, to really get this, we need to zoom out, way out. Because to understand the tactics, you first have to grasp the massive strategic shift that's happening on the world stage right now. Look, what we're witnessing is really the end of an era. That old post-World War II order, the one defined by US dominance and this idea of a rules-based system, it's giving way to something totally different, a multipolar world. A world with several great powers, each with their own spheres of influence. And for the US, a much more singular focus, containing China. Now, to be clear, this isn't about America just packing up and going home. It's a strategic realignment. The goal is to fundamentally change how the U.S. engages with the rest of the world, simply because its current global commitments, they've become totally unsustainable. And this number really just drives a point home. Officially, Congress counts something like 120 U.S. military bases overseas, but independent reports, they put the number at over 750. Think about that. Trying to be ready for conflicts in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia all at the same time, you're just stretching your resources way, way too thin. Okay, so with that big picture in mind, let's circle back to the tariffs. We're going to look at how this classic old-school trade tool is being used in a completely new way to serve this grand pivot. I mean, look at this timeline. It really shows you just how fast all of this is moving. First, you get the big court ruling, but the response is instant, using that old 1974 law to go right around Congress. But here's the catch. It's only good for 150 days. Which leads to the billion-dollar question, actually the $175 billion question, what on earth happens to all the money they already collected? And if you're a business, don't hold your breath for a refund. The president himself basically said, we'll be in court for the next 5 years. That signals a long, drawn-out legal fight. It means that money is probably staying right where it is in government hands for a long, long time, even with over 1,500 lawsuits already filed against them. So, if all that tariff money is going to be tied up in court for years, how is the government planning to fund, everything else? That brings us to what is maybe the most complex, but also the most important piece of this whole puzzle. A kind of financial magic trick happening completely behind the scenes. And it all starts with this absolutely mind-boggling number. The U.S. national debt is closing in on $39 trillion. And with deficits projected to be nearly $2 trillion just this year, it's growing at a rate that's just incredible. So this creates a massive, massive problem. To fund everything, the U.S. government constantly has to sell new bonds. It needs to find buyers. But when your debt is that big, who is going to buy all of it? Where does that demand come from? Well, the answer might be hiding in a pretty obscure banking rule called the SLR, the Supplementary Leverage Ratio. It was put in place after the 2008 crisis to stop banks from taking on too much risk. But it has this one kind of weird key flaw. It treats a super safe US government bond exactly the same as a really risky loan to a small business. So here's the potential strategy. It's basically a 5-step plan. Step 1, you get rid of that SLR rule for banks. Step 2, suddenly banks can buy pretty much unlimited government debt. Step 3, this creates this massive new wave of demand for bonds, which pushes interest rates way down. Step 4, that means borrowing gets much, much cheaper for both the government and for private businesses. And step 5, you get a big stimulus to the economy. It's kind of like the Fed's quantitative easing, but instead of the central bank, it's the commercial banks doing it. And it comes with one very big risk: inflation.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. What is all of this new world order, a potentially weaker dollar, this crazy financial engineering, what does it actually mean for you, for your investments?
This is really fascinating because it shows a hidden risk that a lot of people just don't think about. You might think you're diversified because you own an all-world fund, right? But look at this. Over 60% of that investment is probably tied directly to the US dollar. So if we're heading into an era where the dollar might be getting weaker, that is a massive concentrated risk.
And you can see the so-called smart money is already on the move. I mean, check this out. In just the last 6 months, investors have yanked $75 billion out of U.S. stocks and poured $26 billion into emerging markets. They're clearly chasing growth somewhere other than the U.S.
The market itself is practically shouting at us, sending a really clear signal. In this new world of geopolitical tension and inflation risk, what's working? Real assets. Things like gold and oil are doing great. And what's not working? The darlings of the old era, big tech and Bitcoin, are deep in a bear market. So what's the playbook here? Now, obviously, this isn't financial advice, but the trends do suggest a few key things you might want to think about for your own portfolio. Like maybe it's time to reevaluate how much big tech you own, or analyze your exposure to real assets like gold. And definitely take a look at diversifying your currency exposure beyond just the US dollar. And buckle up because it looks like we should all be preparing for a lot more volatility. And that really leaves us with one final big thought. The rules of the game for the global economy are literally being rewritten right in front of us. So the question you have to ask yourself is this: is my portfolio built for the world of yesterday, or is it built for the world of tomorrow?